what are the three authentication factors? Everyone should know about this. People that have been in the industry, it's something something you have, and something you are, right? Something you know is something like a one-time password, a personal identification PIN number, a security answer to a question. Something you have is a fob, right? A hardware token, an endpoint that can receive a notification or a text message. And something you are is biometric facial recognition, voice recognition, retina recognition. And then when you combine two or more of these factors, then you get multi-factor authentication, right? Just to set the stage for what we're going to talk about. So the first one that we're going to talk about is social engineering. And this is quite interesting because social engineering seems to be the starting point for many different attacks, right? And MFA is no different. And what I'm going to try and do during this session is draw on real life examples that have happened in 2022 and have publicly been published, and kind of break down how each of these techniques were used to bypass the organization or organization's defense mechanisms. So, social bypass via social engineering. So, I don't know if you guys have heard about Twilio. Twilio is a company that does a lot of work around, VoIP and speech to text and all that, telephony, sector side of things. What they documented an incident that was published by Twilio. And one of the things that I have to hand to Twilio is that they were super open about disclosure. They didn't hide it. I know we know a few companies that have hidden it, and it's been in news quite a bit that they got fined and everything. But they didn't hide it. They were pretty open about what happened to them, and I think we can learn from it. So what happened was that hackers had done their recon on the employees. They actually knew the employees' first names. They knew employees' last names. They knew employees' cell phone numbers. Then the hackers, what they did was they impersonated Twilio's IT staff by sending text messages to them, asking them to update passwords. The screenshots on the right here that you see are screenshots of the actual text messages that the employees received. As you can see, the domain that they are asking people to click on, twilio-sso.com, it could be believable. Twilio-okta.com, that is very believable as well. So when people clicked on that, they were presented with a fake authentication page. Twilio used one-time passwords as a 2FA mechanism. And then when users typed in that one-time password, those one-time passwords were simultaneously typed in to the real website, and then the hackers gained access to 125 customers' data. But Twilio did mention that there were no customer passwords that were compromised or authentication tokens that were compromised. Any API keys weren't stolen. The depth of the attack wasn't as bad. It was more of a PR nightmare for Twilio than anything else. Actually, if you go to the disclosure page, they give you a nice step by step of what they found on what date. And they were super open about it. I mean, one thing that we should all expect organizations, especially more public-facing organizations like Twilio or Uber, to do is be a lot more open about any breaches that may happen. And I think just off topic, SEC is making this as a mandatory thing. So, starting next year, I'm not sure if a lot of people know about this yet because, the information is just coming out. SEC has regulated that when you submit your financial statements, there has to be a disclosure about cybersecurity, and we'll actually have a whole webinar about that topic because your CFOs are going to ask you. If you're a publicly traded company, your CFOs are going to ask you for that disclosure and what you need to know and how you need to be prepared. We'll have a whole webinar about that. Bypassing MFA, bypassing MFA via MFA fatigue. This is another one that just happened earlier in the year to Cisco. So Cisco in August 2022 confirmed that they have been breached by a gang called Yan Luang ransomware group. Yan Luang ransomware group claimed that they had stolen 2.75 gigs of Cisco's data, which consisted of engineering files and NDAs, right? How did it happen? And actually, the screenshot on the right is Yan Luang Group's actual website where they announced that they had breached Cisco. So pretty bold of them. They came out, put out this website, hot news straight from Cisco. Time's up. So this is where they announced that Cisco was breached. The way they were breached was pretty interesting, and this needs to spark a discussion about BYOD and segregating data between personal and corporate. Right? The Yanluan group compromised a Cisco employee's personal Gmail account. And it was possibly due to a phishing attack, or the employee has been using or reusing passwords, and the employee downloaded probably a credential stealing malware. But the common, it's very common to find people's passwords. If you just go to have I been pawned and type in the password that you have been using, it will actually tell you whether or not your password was found in some breach somewhere, right? Google Chrome actually gives you that as well in terms of letting you know whether the passwords that you're saved are found in some other breach. Now, once the employee had access to user's Gmail account, the employee was also using Google's password manager, and the bad actor found Cisco's credentials stored on the password manager. Uh, Once they had the credentials, they still had to get around the MFA issue. And the way they got around the MFA issue was basically by calling the user, pretending to be that they are from the support organization, and then also, pushing down MFA authorization notifications over and over again. And, eventually the user hit approve on that. And then once the user hit approve, the Yan Luang gang basically enrolled their own device into the authentication system. And then once they enrolled their own device, at that point, they just needed to gain persistence, and they used tools like Log Me In and TeamViewer to have constant access into the environment. Then they dropped Cobalt Strike. You guys know about Cobalt Strike. Cobalt Strike is a tool that can be used to crack passwords and help lateral movement. Mimikatz is another tool that actually cracks store passwords in Windows systems. Because Windows traditionally, if you don't have the systems properly hardened, stores the passwords and the key to like stores the passwords in an encrypted way, but the key to unencrypt the password is stored right next to it. This is like a legacy Windows thing, but you can get around that by ensuring that you have proper security baselines set up. But also, once they had this initial access, then they started making lateral movements to compromise admin accounts, and then they gained access to 3,100 files. The thing also to keep note of is that the MFA solution wasn't properly designed, because after a few prompts and declines, MFA solutions should have ceased from asking the users for the prompt over and over again. I think there's something to be said about designing your MFA solution in a proper manner to prevent this from happening. All right, so that was Cisco. The next one is, I think, one of my favorite ones because it's quite scary. This has been session hijacking has been around for a while. We've seen in the last few years session hijacking being used to compromise multi-factor authentication. And so in the next one here, MFA bypass via session hijacking. There's a tool that's readily available called EvilGenix, right? It's a man in the middle framework. The tool templatizes a phishing page, which looks very similar to your authentic login page. On the right-hand side here, you see a page that the tool has actually created, which looks exactly like your Office 365 login page. Now, once you have that Office 365 login page, a common social engineering technique can be used to trick users in clicking the fake website. And then once the fake website has been presented, the users ask for a username. Now, thing to keep in mind is this fake website now will proxy over to the real website. And because it's passing the sessions along, it will then, the real website will ask for a password, right? And then the real website will also ask for the token for the MFA. But once that token is entered, the session cookie that website generates is now intercepted by the bad actor. And the session cookie is this encrypted screenshot that you see here. It's a long encrypted string of characters. And that session cookie, then the attacker can take that session cookie, log on to the developer tools on your Chrome browser. Actually, if you go to Chrome settings, there's a setting called developer tools. Go over to the real website where you want to log in as a user, upload the session cookie using the developer tools, and then just hit refresh. And then when you hit refresh, because the session cookie was hijacked, the website doesn't even ask you for a username and password at that point, and you just log straight in. The organization's done everything right. Organizations had a two-factor authentication properly set up. The organization had controls around this, but the fact that the user was pawned into giving up their session cookie unbeknownst to the user, now you can have your organization completely breached as a result of this. The next one that we're going to talk about is a fairly new one, last couple of years. This is the fastest attack rising because it allows undetected access and unfettered access. The SIM jacking, there's actually a SIM jacking tool, and I'm not going to talk about the tool in this session right now. What I'm going to talk about is the traditional method. But just to give you some color on the SIM jacking tool, the SIM jacking tool, just via text message, can download a malware on your user's phone, and then they can actually track just using simple SMS messages and commands that can be sent to the phone, users' locations and other such things. So MFA bypass using SIM jacking. The attackers have been using this to take over cell phone accounts and personal information, including text messages and financial accounts. What they do is, they have your phone number, and they know that you're using that as a single factor authentication. So what they do is they will text you pretending to be be your carrier, asking you to update the info by clicking on the link. You will be then taken to a fake website which mimics the carrier's website. Then be asked for your personal information, including your cell phone number and account PIN. Bad actor will then call the carrier and ask to activate a different SIM. And as soon as that different SIM has been activated, now they have access to intercept your 2FA codes and then compromise your organization. So here we have 4 different ways that that MFA can be compromised, right? So let's talk about some common mistakes. Somebody has talked about some common, or had asked questions about some common mistakes earlier in the chat. One of the things that was fascinating to me while I was researching for this webinar as well was that Microsoft released a statement in February 2022 that only 22% of its Azure Active Directory users use multi-factor authentication to secure their accounts. Now, that was the stats that came out in 2022, but as of 2021, only 22% were using it. I mean, why could that be? I think there's multiple factors. There's a lot of pushback, and I've worked with organizations that have heavily pushed back on MFA because their executives don't want that second factor authentication. But I think that's because MFA needs to be designed with a proper design and planning engagement. Many organizations just feel that it's as simple as turning the checkbox on. And I've had conversations with people that have been told that, hey, MFA can be turned on, no problem. It's quick, right? That's just simply not true. I mean, yes, it is that simple to turn it on, but there are other issues that arise from not planning it correctly, right? It requires understanding the organization's authentication needs. Like, where do you authenticate from? What do you authenticate to, right? Where users' devices are located, what devices are users using as their way of accessing organizations' data. These are some of the common mistakes that people or organizations do, which is not really thinking about MFA in depth or as planned deployment of their overall security strategy. It's not a one-off thing. Now, the considerations that you need to have when you're deploying MFA, right, is organizational change management. You need to document, what assets and data the MFA solution is protecting. One of the big deals in MFA deployment, especially in the larger organizations that we face, is protocols, right? If you're using Azure MFA, it supports modern authentication, but then even the legacy MFA that Azure used to have, it bypasses SMTP and IMAP and POP, right? So yeah, you may be protecting yourself with one protocol, but then if you leave protocols that cannot be secured by multi-factor authentication, then you're kind of half achieving your security. So you need to figure out ways to deprecate those protocols from your organization. You need to review the legacy systems that may fail or once the MFA is adopted, because those legacy systems may be using older protocols. The other thing that you need to also think about is how do you create exceptions around those? So there are secure ways of creating exceptions for those legacy systems so that even though they may not support MFA, you can still make use of other security mechanisms that can still adequately support and secure those legacy systems, right? You also need to think about what form of MFA is required. Authentication application or hard tokens, right? End users, do they have ability to adopt the new technology, right? Are your end users savvy enough that if you give them a new technology and ask them to hit approve on their phone, are you going to get a pushback on that? Do your users feel that there is an issue with having a corporate application installed on their phone? Do they consider that as an invasion of privacy? We run into that not only in MFA engagements, but actually endpoint and BYOD engagements. The biggest problem that we see is, hey, the project's going well, and then we are ready to deploy, and then a whole bunch of users say, sorry, I'm not gonna let you control my phone because I don't know what the organization is gonna see. So a little bit of distrust in the big brother approach from organizations. So there needs to be an HR policy around that. So if you're asking your users to install a corporate sponsored application, then the HR needs to define the privacy policy, and then there has to be an education session that shows what the corporations can and cannot see. Right? When you're deploying Microsoft Endpoint Manager, there is strict delineation between what Microsoft can and cannot see on your phones. And I think there's an education session that needs to be had with MFA and BYOD policies and such. How can you prevent all these things from happening? One of the quickest things that you need to do is stop SMS form of authentication. If I'm not mistaken, Microsoft's already starting to deprecate the SMS factor authentication. You need to stop that. Move users to a application-based MFA using Microsoft Authenticator app or Google Authenticator app or whatever solutions that you're using. The one-time password again, that's a problem because you're typing something in. Session hijacks can actually compromise that. When you're asking users to authenticate the second factor, choose a solution that actually shows them the location where the authentication request is coming from. The authentication request, so when they get the request, there should be a map that says, hey, the request came from, I don't know, Italy, right? If the user doesn't know that is not in Italy, then they should have an ability to just say no. This is a fake request, right? Don't allow your corporate data from a non-registered devices, right? That's one of the biggest things. So even if your MFA gets breached, there is policies in place that will stop people from accessing the corporate data. Stop your users from accessing corporate data from their home computers or unregistered phones. I think this is the simplest one. You need to have security policies, not just MFA, but corresponding security policies that basically create conditions before a user can access the corporate data, right? And then harden your infrastructure when everything else is in place. Hardening the infrastructure will help people or will stop bad actors from making lateral movements. Like a YubiKey or something will definitely eliminate the issues. But a final defense, honestly, is security awareness training. You need to have a security awareness training program built in to your organization. We are working with an organization where we are creating a security awareness program for them, where every month users will be taking 10 to 15 minutes of either an assessment or a test or some kind of a video where security is always front and center. This is the biggest, the final defense, as we all say in security, is user is your final line of defense. So security awareness training is the most important thing.